Welcome to week 3, day 11 of the fall 2025 Web Development Technologies course. I'm Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. So, first, I just kind of want to go over a few different housekeeping items and kind of reminders. I guess first here, as far as instructor availability, I try to make myself available as much as possible, but especially weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, and sometimes late at night. I know every students have different hours they work on their assignments, but just because generally my I guess my office hours is pretty much from the morning here until you know till around 3 in the afternoon. And obviously I try to make myself available, but I'm not going to always be available. And so I'm not, there's going to be times that I'm not going to be answering your questions right away. I'm not constantly monitoring my inbox and Discord all the time. So if I did, it'd be driving me crazy. To be honest with you, because people contact me all kinds of different hours. And I like to always help, but that's not always possible. So just kind of keep that in mind. Usually during the day hours, I'm going to be available. A lot more. On weekends, I have things I have to do, other things, so I'm not going to always be available. So just keep that in mind. As far as late assignments, for one thing, please, if you turn in something late, please let me know you're turning in things late. We have quite a few different assignments, and so usually when I'm grading, I'm grading like I pull the repositories at the after the deadline, and then I start grading everything that was due that week, right? So if you ended up submitting something that was due the previous week or even maybe 2 weeks ago or whatever, I'm not always gonna. Sometimes I see it, but not always. I don't always know exactly what you have and don't have at that point. So, please let me know. If you turn in something late so I can go ahead and grade it. And also, always, think strategically about your assignments. And what I mean by that is, as far as especially the late stuff, remember that, certain things build on each other. Certain things, some of those assignments build on each other and some don't. The apply and the analyze and the extend, them are pretty much, assignments that you do, and then you're pretty much done with that. You're not coming back to do, you're not using, you might use some things you learned, but you're not actually using that code again. Whereas when we have those other assignments, the U-turn, which is based, all those different ones, the dog grooming, the personal portfolio, strike a chord, and the wildlife rescue, them things all build on each other, right? So you always want to really make sure that you can't do chapter 4 for one of those labs. Say the wildlife rescue. You can't do chapter 4 if you didn't do 3 and 2 and 1, right? So they kind of build on each other. So kind of keep that in mind. You kind of really almost gotta get caught up on those so you can actually move forward. Whereas the apply and analyze and stuff, you don't necessarily have to, if there's something, if you don't want to get too far behind, you want to make sure you're caught up on the ones that build. Whereas these other ones, maybe you can kind of put that if you're doing something late, put that off maybe a little bit later than the other ones. If I hope that makes sense. And then obviously the hands-on tests are always very important. And if in the syllabus it actually mentions that to turn in a hands-on test late, you must also make sure that you complete all the other assignments before you turn in one late. Okay, so if you're going to be working, you should probably always make sure you turn on a hands-on assignment before the deadline, because if you don't, then if you want to go ahead and try to make that up, I'm going to have to go look and see, did you do all these other assignments? And if you didn't, then you're going to have to complete them before you can do the hands-on test. Please let me know if you're confused about that, and I can talk to you about that specifically. I do want to kind of go over, we're talking about all those different assignments. I want to go over the directory structure again. People are just kind of doing different things. Students are doing different things, and I understand it. Because originally my idea was for the apply and all of those to do those just within this exercise folder. But since everything pretty much is in this data files folder, I decided just, go ahead and use that, right? So, but one thing you got to keep in mind here is this data files directory. If it doesn't have a specific data file, it may be missing a directory. So, so like here on the chapter 2 one, this is just the template. It doesn't even have the it doesn't have the apply. So you'll actually have to create that folder to put something in there, right? The other ones I think already had some files in there, right? And that's why. But if it doesn't have a file, this is from the publisher, and they didn't always include all the folders. So just because a folder's missing, don't mean you don't have to do the assignment, right? You just need to create the folder for that. But for the apply and the extend and analyze, all of them, just do those under data files, okay? And then as far as the U-turn stuff, that's under exercises. You can ignore all these other chapter. We're not going to use any of these other directories here, these folders. In U-turn, this is where you want to do your dog grooming and your personal portfolio. So these build on each other. So even if you did it somewhere else, you can kind of just, when you get time, move that over, move the stuff you've already done over here, and then you can just change this. It's because it can keep building. That way you don't copy things all over the place, right? But some of those assignments are going to ask you to go to data file, to use certain things from the data files directory. So you will have to copy those things. You have to copy images over and so forth, right? So, and then the same thing for the labs as well. It may ask you to copy something for the labs over as well, okay? So there's places where it refers to the data files for the assignments that are ongoing, and you'll just have to copy those pieces of images or files or whatever over. And then just to kind of review real quick on labs, same thing. You've got strike a chord and the wild rescue. So like I said, and those assignments sometimes mention to use certain images in that. You'll need to copy those over into here. And it'll be easier for you in the long run instead of doing that, because it's going to, otherwise you're going to have to copy, after you finish one chapter, you're going to have to copy that over to the next chapter and to the next chapter, where it's a lot easier just to go ahead and use these. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do just a really quick, very, very high level review of chapter 4. So an effective website design is crucial for capturing an audience attention and attracting new customers. HTML provides a structural foundation for a web page, while cascading style sheets determines its formatting. Keeping the content and style separate in an external style sheet allows a web page to be formatted in countless ways, which is particularly useful for maintaining large websites. So we've talked about this before. There's benefits in keeping the technology separate. Your HTML separate from your cascading style sheets. And that whole concept is called, separation of concerns. And it also is relevant with other programming frameworks and so forth, and languages and models. It's pretty much a universal programming type best practices is separation of concerns. So, and there were some times we had some assignments where we went ahead and did inline stuff that's right there within the code. But for best practices, you really don't want to do that. But it's important to understand how that works, and especially if you get out and get a job somewhere, you might have to go look at some older code where a lot of things are in the file. So it's helpful to understand that. Okay. A CSS file contains style rules or rule sets, we know that, which are made up of a selector, a property, and a value. The selector specifies the element to be styled, while the property is the characteristics you want to change, and the value is the new setting for that property. Types of styles. So you have inline styles, right? And that's obviously where you go ahead and put it right there within the HTML element itself, right? Maybe on H1 tag, you can go ahead and use a style attribute right there in the H1 tag, one specific tag, and have the styling right there, right? Embedded is at the top of your HTML file, right? Within your head section, you go ahead and embed the style right in there using a style tag. And then there's obviously the external styles, which is in a separate CSS file, .css file, which you link to from your HTML document. And always realize that whatever you put in your external styles, if you, let's say you style a heading, okay, you style a heading and you also style that same heading in embedded styles, that is going to take precedence over, I don't want to say overwrite, but it's going to take precedence over what you did for your external, right? And then what you did at your inline is going to take precedence over what you did in your embedded, right? Okay, as far as selectors, basically three different kinds. We have the element selectors, where you just have the name of the element, like H1 tag, a P tag, a main tag. Them are your element selectors. Then you can also have ID selectors, and these apply to an element with a specific ID attribute. And always remember that they should be unique. Every ID in your HTML document should be unique. So when you're using that hash symbol in front of a name, that should only style that one specific element that you have that ID associated with, right? Now for class selectors, where in your HTML element you have to use the keyword class equals, right? Class equals and the name of the class that comes from your CSS file. Remember, in your CSS file, it's always going to have a dot or a period, right? And that can be used multiple times throughout your file. Classes can be used multiple times, where an ID is really for use just for one specific element that has that ID on it. Okay, the CSS box model and page layout. So remember that basically everything on a web page is a box, even though you may have some formatting that turns something into a circle, but actually the way that is positioned on your web page is in a box model. Okay, it has a margin, it has a border, it has padding. Okay, and remember the margin is always the space outside of the element's border. Okay. So always remember, if you see a border around something, you always can think to yourself, okay, I know the margin's outside this border. And then if you see some spacing in between the border and that main content, whatever it is, you know that that's the padding, right? And this is the space between the content and the border. We also talked about the float property. A float property is used to position elements to the left or right of other elements on the page, while keeping them within their parent element. And then there's also a clear property that's used to specify which sides of an element can be next to a floated element. And there's an overflow property used to control the content that is too large to fit in an element's box. As far as best practices, CSS resets is browser don't use all the same default style rules. And like I said, Chrome puts their own, a base CSS file in there no matter what. It's always going to have some base CSS. I don't want to say file. It has some just base CSS that it applies to any file coming in there. So it's always a good idea to just reset those. The book shows you just a small little set of elements to reset. But also we seen that one assignment where we use that normalize, which is kind of a little more, kind of does a lot more than just what a basic reset does. So either way, okay, either way. But obviously, if you want a probably true reset, that normalize is going to do a lot more there. But for the most part, most of the time, just using the simple little reset that the book demonstrates, that'll work as well. Comments is crucial. It's crucial to add comments to your CSS file to explain the code and make it easier for developers or your future self to understand. Comments in the CSS start with a / asterisk and end with an asterisk /. So it's different. Remember, it's different. Comments in a HTML file are different than what's in a CSS file. So keep that in mind. The CSS is these comments are also used in many other programming languages as well, such as when we get into JavaScript. This is how you do a comment for JavaScript. Also, other programming languages, especially that we use here, like C#. This is also a comment in C# as well. So this one is more useful for multiple different programming languages, where the comments for the HTML is more specific to the HTML markup language, right? And also, make sure you kind of validate your CSS. We have that link, the Jigsaw link for validating your CSS. So try to make sure you're always doing that as well. Okay. Let's see. What else do I want to go over here? I think that's all. Enough on them key concepts. So let's go ahead and preview this HOT. Hands-on test. This is our hands-on test number 2. I'm not going to go through all of this line by line, but this is basically you're creating a single landing page, just a single page for a local restaurant, whatever local restaurant you want to do. That's fine. And then from there, pretty much, just make sure you put it in the right directory. It's always important. And go from there. Everything else is pretty much explanatory in here. I do want to point out a few things in here we're going to take a quick look at. So let's go down here. Bear with me for a second. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. And so also, you could always use W3 schools. You can always use W3 schools to take a look at anything, help you with the tags. You don't understand those, whatever. W3 schools is there. There's a good resource there for you for that. Especially like the float and the clear. You can look those up. And we're going to be using an iframe again, like we've done a couple different times. So let me go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and remember how to get the embedded map. I'll review that real quick. And also I want to review, this clickable link with this geotag. Okay. And this is really more, this is far, when you click, when you create this and you click on it, it's not going to do anything. If you're using it on your computer, but on mobile it will do something. So what I will end up doing when I'm testing, I'm going to end up I'm going to use my phone. I'm going to go to your repository. I'm going to bring up that file. It'll download it to my phone. I'm going to download that HTML file, and I'm going to click on that link, and it's going to open up the app on the phone that's associated with as far as maps is concerned, right? As far as geo maps are concerned. So that's how I'm going to test that. Okay, this isn't a link you're really wanting it to be for a desktop. Okay, this is just an example of something that's used in a mobile situation. So I'm gonna show you how to get the geo longitude and latitude for whatever restaurant you choose. So I did create a page real quick that kind of follows this hands-on test. I'm not going to show you the code, but there's in St. Charles, there's a restaurant called Tony's on Main Street. Um, so I put this together real quick. Um, you got this top menu here, and basically this is a one-page type thing. And so when you click on this, it's going to go to the different places on the page. So you want to look that up again if you don't remember how to do that. That's like bookmarks. So okay, and yours can look a lot different. And then I went ahead and also linked to the link to the website here. This is their real website. Now, I do want to mention some things on this. Um, So for this assignment, you're probably you're going to grab a couple images in that, right? You're going to grab a couple images, and some of this stuff isn't going to work like that because this is more of a modern type website here, and they're using some different technologies. You ain't going to be able to just do right click and save the image, okay? There are so you got to watch whatever restaurant you choose. It might even be best if it has more of a rudimentary type website because it's going to be easier for you to save those images. So for the images I ended up going like the banquet parties here, and they had this was the one right here. Right click, save image as, right? If you go back here to like the main menu on this, right click, you can't save that image because this is a loop. This is creating a loop through multiple images, little video files, right? There's a video file. So you have to watch that. And even sometimes the other ones as well, you think, okay, well, same thing here, just how this is set up. So if you don't have save image as, then you probably want to find something else, okay? Find something else on the page that will work for you. Or go to a website that's probably more rudimentary, kind of more simplistic. So you can just, like I said, you go and like here on banquet parties room, all of these where I could just right click and just save image as, okay? So that's what I wanted to mention first on that. Okay. All right. So I think another thing you probably could have done that I probably should have done here is also remember on your link you can you can have it open up in a new tab, right? I didn't do that, so this is going to open up in itself, right? So probably best you open up underscore blank if you recall that. Remember that. That way it'll open up in a new tab. So no big deal on that. So here's a few different menu items. Good idea to maybe put a little more styling on these. And so then here's that embedded map. So let's just kind of review that real quick because it might have been a little while since you did that. So in here, so obviously this is Google Maps. So if you go ahead and just search for, get the address of your restaurant and search for it on Google Maps. And to get the iframe, so you can embed the map, you go to share, and you click embed map, and then you copy the HTML, and this is that iframe, right? Just to kind of review that. And then as far as those geocodes, so you're going to need some geocodes here. And to get those on the map, you go over and here's the pin of that. When I search for this, let me just do this again. So here's the pin for that. Right click on this, and here are your longitude and latitude. And you can just click on this and it'll copy it to the clipboard. Okay. So that's what you're going to want to do for those, for that link. And like I said on that, let's go back to here. So this link here, and I don't know if you can see at the bottom here, it's got the geocodes, but if you click on this, it won't do anything. But if you bring this up, so if you bring this up in your mobile app, you'll see that it will go to a map, or it will ask you to choose which app you want to use to display this. Okay, so it has a different effect on mobile than it does on a web page. Okay. And obviously, we're just using this kind of as a demonstration for learning. You know, in the real world, you don't want to have links on your page really that, you know, such because somebody brings it up on a desktop, laptop, iPad or whatever, and not be able to go to a app, right? Most iPads have apps as well, but you know, especially just a desktop computer, you don't want to have a link that doesn't really do anything. So. But in this case, that's how this will work, and this will work. You should see this for your mobile. And this will, the same thing with this, but this will ask you on a desktop to pick an app for the phone. Let's see here. So that's about it. Oh yeah, I do want to kind of go over one thing here. So this area here on this web page is called what's called a hero image section, and it's a prominent and a visually impactful area at the top of the page. So it kind of draws your attention. You come in here, you know, your attention is going to go right to this. So you know, it's kind of a place where you kind of want to create a nice design, make it a very strong first impression, so to speak. So you want it to be large and prominent. Here, it's called a hero section. Hero section typically features a very large image, a video, a graphic that spans the full width of the browser window. Kind of sets the tone. It's not just decorative element. It's a visual hook that immediately conveys the brand's identity. The web, and website's purpose and main message. The image should be, chosen. So, this will probably not the best thing. I put this together quickly because, maybe some food item would look better here, and that this was just an image that actually just kind of worked well for me on this. It looked good. Some of the food items, especially some images, if some images are smaller images, it's not going to look good when you try to use it on a full page type thing. So, and it's okay for this hands-on test. If it doesn't look great, I understand. I tried to find something that did look a little better. First one I used kind of didn't look good because it was a smaller image, and so the resolution kind of gets messed up when you try to stretch it like that. So, but this is kind of a aerial image. It's kind of a place to kind of it's going to draw your attention to it, and you want to kind of make a good impression on a web page right at the beginning there. All right. Let me see if there's anything else in this hot that I really wanted to go over. Just make sure you do your screenshots. I know there's some assignments that some students weren't creating that asked for screenshots in previous assignments, so make sure you take a screenshot. I usually use in Microsoft Windows, I believe I already showed this, it's a snipping tool. And you just do new here, and then you can just snip this. And then usually this goes, and then usually this will go into a, and for me, let me show you where it goes for me. And probably by default, I would think that it will be the same unless things are set up different, but usually you have maybe, under a pictures, and then you have screenshots, okay? And under screenshots, sometimes you have to go ahead here. I go select details here, and today's the 8th, so this is only a screenshot, so this is the one. So you just copy this, drop this in your repository. All right. If I double click this, will be that screenshot that I just did there. But obviously your screenshot's not going to be your page. It's going to be the results from your validations. So, okay. That's about all I have on that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory for the most part. So use whatever tools, resources you need on the internet or whatever, and please try to get this done by the end of the week. Get this done earlier than later, and get it checked in. So, okay. So let's see here. So, chapter 5 is going to be, about responsive design, and one of the big, parts of that's also about like the um, mobile first type development where you want to build for mobile first. And kind of the reason for that is kind of look here, and this changes within time, but more sites are accessed via, this is global website traffic, is much more mobile than it is desktop. Okay. And the only reason you probably see a lot of this is from people in the office sitting on desktop computers in their office, right? But generally, even the people who are sitting in their office is sometimes using their phone for also some things, and they're also doing it. But a lot of people are just using their mobile to access websites. So there's a lot of benefit in the mobile first strategy to create, get it working for mobile first, and then make sure from there it works on other size screens as well. Okay, let's see here. So we're going to go through this some. So in this chapter, you have mastered the materials in this chapter when you can explain the principles of responsive design, describe the pros and cons of a mobile website, explain the design principles of a mobile website, describe a mobile first strategy, define a viewport, insert a meta viewport element, use a mobile simulator, create a sticky element, integrate custom fonts, use a pseudo class, create a mobile friendly navigation system, add a telephone link, which we've already kind of done that. We've already done this. A different exercise. We're doing this on the HOT, so we're kind of ahead on that one. Make rounded corners. Okay. So responsive design is a website development strategy that strives to provide a optimal user experience of a website regardless of device use. By applying responsive design principles, the web page and content respond to the screen size of the user's device. Okay, it minimizes unnecessary scrolling and zooming, making reading and interacting with the site as convenient and intuitive as possible. We're not actually going to be doing this project here, but it's important to have your viewport element to your document. Put that in your meta section. Here it's showing you about creating a sticky header. I'm going to show you an example of that. Here you're adding custom fonts, style pages for a mobile viewport, and style a map for a mobile viewport. Exploring responsive design. Content is easy to read and navigate on devices of 3 sizes: desktop browser, tablet, and phone. Philosophy that is constantly redefined as HTML and CSS standards, browsers, and technology evolve and improve. Okay, here's showing how a site looks for a desktop. Here's showing one for a tablet, and then on the right is a mobile device, and it's can reposition based on your device. As up here on the desktop, you noticed on the right hand side you've got "Hi, I'm Ethan," some information. Where on your mobile device it's underneath the picture, right? So the page can change based on that screen size. Fluid layout. So fluid layout applies a proportional size element measurements to the web page, wireframe, and content. The viewport is the viewing area of the web page. Refers to the area of the web page that a user sees at any one time, regardless of the device, browser, screen size, screen resolution, window size, or orientation. Yeah, so it's also important. Yeah, it's because you could have something on landscape view or landscape view, or so you could have it in different ways, right? Um, okay, media queries. Media queries allow a web page developer to detect the approximate pixel size of the current viewport. So we'll see examples of this where I'm going to show you. It's going to have some number. It's going to have like the pixel size of that page, and we're going to use that Google Developer Tools, and you can see as when that changes in size, it reaches a certain number, then it's going to use a certain viewport. Okay, it's not going to use a different viewport, but it's going to use some different styles based on that. And allows the developers to selectively apply CSS rules that work best for that viewport size. You can actually, not that you necessarily want to do this, but you can actually, based on changing the viewport size and using those media queries, you can actually move something from this side of the screen by using CSS to another side, or moving it up or down, or actually just saying, I don't even want to display this at all, right? Because there may be some things that's a very intricate, complex application that runs fantastic on a desktop computer, but you need a lot of space to do that. Whereas some of that stuff you just said, we're just scale this down, and you can actually remove some elements. Not that that's really all is a very good idea for a lot of different reasons, but I'm just saying that it's possible, right? It's possible to get rid of things, to scale something down, and you could actually use CSS to hide this, hide that, based on that viewport size, based on how that changes. And we won't go into a lot of details on that, but we'll see. We're not going to go into that extent, but I'll show you how you go and change that viewport size within Chrome Developer Tools, and you'll see how CSS will be applied to that. Designing for mobile devices. So mobile website, completely separate, parallel website optimized for mobile users to address problems with viewports. Identify with an M or MO prefix in the URL. So yeah, you can design a separate just for a mobile, right? But sometimes that's not always the case either. It can be done using a regular website, and it just knows it's based on the viewport, right? But this is telling you about a mobile website in general. It optimizes the viewing experience for a wide range of devices using one website. Major downside, multiplies the work required to maintain what becomes two separate websites for the same organization. So back in some years ago, not that long ago, if you wanted a mobile site, your mobile site would be completely different than your desktop website. And a lot of times, they'd actually have different team members, different people on different teams working on that, because you had to know all of the intricate details about that mobile operating system, right? And so for there's Android, right? For Android phones, the Android operating system, and for Apple it would be iOS. For iPhones, it's iOS. And then, most of the time you've got a, uh, Windows, you've got a browser in your Windows. And so to build for each one, you'd have to do something completely, you had to do specific things, right? And it's much more cumbersome. Mobile first strategy. So the idea of my mobile first strategy is because a lot of people access web from a mobile phone as opposed to desktops. So it employs a responsive design principle. The web developer designs the flexible wireframe and essential content for the smallest viewport first. Okay, so you get it working on the smallest, which is usually the hardest in some ways, but you get it working on that smallest, and then progressively adding more content as that viewport grows. Okay, media queries are used to add styles for progressively larger viewports, progressing from tablet to laptop and desktop. More productive and effective way to build a website from scratch. Designing for mobile web devices continued here. Implementation of a website development approach depends on many factors: current environment, target audience, available resources, time available to tackle the project. Um, so first you design for the phone, you know, you develop it, get it all working on the phone, then the tablet, laptop, desktop. Um, that's the mobile first, and the traditional approach is working on a desktop, then a laptop, tablet, and phone. So then you always have to realize that some applications are really not meant to run on phones. So that's always, it depends on the requirements of of a project, right? So there might be some project that we're building this very sophisticated dashboard that has all kinds of different functionality that it's just not really going to work. Maybe you have some certain little functionality to work on a phone, but you really need a big desktop, right? So, but for basic websites and stuff like that, for most websites, for your basic websites, yeah, you should be able to have that set up that it's going to work on all different devices, right? So it all depends on the everything's based on the requirements of the project. Who's your target audience, right, and everything else. Using responsive web design, web pages with a fluid layout adjust the web page design and content based on the size of the viewport. Responsive designs are based on fluid layouts. Fixed layouts do not change in width based on the size of the viewport. You use fixed measurement units such as pixels to find the width of areas of a wireframe that fix the width of the content regardless of the size of the viewport. Following a mobile first strategy, it's better to use a single column layout for a mobile display, as this prevents scrolling horizontally. Displaying what mobile devices users need and want on a single screen with minimal scrolling creates a more enjoyable experience. Styling content for mobile devices requires that each page to be analyzed. Determine the most important content on the page and style the content. So this is kind of showing a desktop. And this is what this is what's kind of done also in early days of a project that, you're create wireframes. This is how we want it to look like on a desktop. This is how we want it to look on a mobile. And then a developer will use that as part of that, plus some other requirements to go ahead and develop the application, right? Develop the website based on those requirements and wireframes. So, okay, let's go ahead here. Let me see where we're at here. Let's go ahead and look at a few things here. I don't want to just go through all of these like that. Okay, so I'm going to point out a few more things in these slides here, and then we're going to go ahead and look at some code and also look at the the Google Developer Tools and see how that kind of works with the different media queries. So also kind of wanted to touch on this, a pseudo class. And we'll look at that here again. I think we've already kind of looked at this uh, before, but we'll go ahead and going to get into this a little more. A pseudo class can be used with a selector to specify the state of an element. For example, you can specify a style to apply when a mouse hovers over an element. Okay, it can be a lot more important for a mobile first strategy. Okay. So essential information can be added to the home page that without removing the content for the web page. And a div can be used to accomplish that. By default, element borders use a 90-degree angle at a corner. Um, that's kind of the default, right? And you can see that the angle when you specify a border all around an element. But you can also do what's called rounded corners, and rounded corners looks a little more appealing, a little more aesthetically appealing. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that here. And it uses what's called border radius to do that. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, let's go ahead and look at some code here. Let me show you this website here. Just a quick little example thing. So here you got a responsive web design. If you notice up here, you've got this header is sticky. There's some other thing, this can be used on anything, any kind of thing, but the header is sticky, and the way what that means is you'll see, this is going to move a little bit, but once it gets right there, it's going to just be fixed from there until you get back up to this top portion, and then it will go back up to this navigation area. But this is what's called sticky. This is the concept of sticky, and we'll look at that. Okay. And you probably can't see because my picture's in the way. So I'm just going to move this over here for a second. So here you can see this fixed box down here at the bottom. And you can see no matter what you do, right, that fixed box is just going to stay there. Okay. The fixed box is just going to stay there. And as you can see what kind of happened here, actually making this big, you can see how that did change. Item 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now you've got that, right? You make that even smaller, and you'll be down to a single one, right? Also changes the navigation. So this is more of a mobile, okay? And I will show you in developer tools as well how that changes at certain points. Okay. All right, let's look at a little bit of code here. Close this one out. All right. First, I want to talk about this viewport here. So this tag here, okay, it's a meta tag, right? It's always all meta tags are going to be in your head section. Remember that, right? And just as a quick review, because I did see some assignments where people were putting other things in the head section. The only thing you can really put in the head section is, links to things, style sheets. Obviously, when we do JavaScript, we'll be doing that. Also, you could put CSS embedded styles in there. The title, and this is really basically the only thing you're going to visually ever see on a web tab. When you bring up a web tab, it's within that tab itself. Nothing else in here is going to display on the page, right? And then everything else is basically going to be within this head section is always going to be your meta tags, right? So you got this meta tag viewport, and this is a crucial part of responsive web design. It's placed within the head, right? And provides the instructions to the browser on how to control the page dimensions and scaling on different devices, especially mobile phones and tablets. So this attribute identifies the right here, name viewport. Name viewport identifies the meta tag as a viewport tag. The viewport is a visible area of the web page on a device. On a desktop, this is the browser window. On the mobile device, it's the screen itself. Okay. Content. So it's content here. So content, this attribute holds a comma separated list of instructions for the viewport. And for the most part, what you're going to see is your width, and you're going to see initial scale, right? So width, this is this part here is the most important part of the tag, actually, because without it, many mobile browsers will render the page in a virtual desktop width, and then kind of shrink the whole entire web page down, right? So without that, it'll just it'll try to make it look like a desktop, and it's just going to scale it down as small as it can to try to fit in there, right? So this makes the text as images very small and difficult to read. And by setting the width to device width, you're telling the browser to set the viewport width to the actual width of the device's screen in CSS pixels. So you're communicating basically, when you bring this up in a mobile phone, you're actually kind of communicating with that saying, hey, go ahead and use the actual width of the device's screen in CSS pixels, okay? So that will make it much more easier to read. So this prevents the browser from doing the zoom out behavior that ensures the page starts at a 1-to-1 scale with device's screen, okay? The uploaded documents mention this element, okay? All right. So initial scale 1.0. So this attribute sets the initial zoom level when the page first loads. A value of 1.0 means there is no zoom. 1.0, I know you would think, well, maybe this is 1, but no, it's really, this is basically saying no zoom. This is just the default. 1.0 is the default. So it's basically saying this is the natural size. And this works in conjunction with the width device width to, this part here. It works in conjunction with that to ensure that the content is not shrunk or zoomed in by the browser, providing a consistent and readable layout right from the start. All right. So next I want to show you let's look at the styles here a little bit. So for a responsive image, maybe I'll bring this up over here. Okay, for a responsive image, so the important ones here for this, most important for this responsive image is making sure you have height being auto and max width being 100%. Okay, width and height, very important for that, for a responsive image, okay? By doing that, so if you look here over on the right-hand side, I'm just going to make this screen bigger and smaller. So if I make it bigger, you can see how much bigger it gets. If I make it smaller, It's just going to shrink with the screen, right? Um, if I get rid of this, I hope this works. I hope this is going to work like I think it's going to work here. But see, as you can see, it's the full size of it, right? It's just trying to, you know, try to get it on there as best it can, but it's not going to be responsive, right? So if I go ahead, let me get rid of that. And now we're back to this, which is make it responsive, make it bigger and smaller, right? So the important things are for the responsive one is max width 100% and height being auto, okay? Let's look at rounded corners. So let's see on the HTML which ones had rounded corners here. So that's the placeholder. Yep, that one there. Okay, which one? That was it. Okay, well, that's kind of rounded corners anyhow, but yeah, that's okay. So as far as rounded corners is concerned, and I don't know if I mentioned this before. I think for most part we kind of always did. I don't know if in the book. So basically you can have multiple classes, right? And so this one, if you have a space, you can have multiple classes. You have a space in between, so it will apply this style, and then after that it'll apply whatever styles are here. You can have multiple classes by just using a space. You don't want to put a comma here. Just put the name of the class and then the other name of the class. Okay, rounded corners. So the thing for rounded corners is using this border radius, okay? Because in reality, like I've said before, everything on a web page is always a box, right? So let me get to that. It's always hidden for me. So here's our content for this. Here's our content. So our content, it's a square, it's a box, right? And we're adding our padding, right? We add our padding on it. And we do our border. And here's our margin. Now, if we change, and you don't have to do this, I don't want to confuse you here, but you can actually change things right in here. It's not going to save it. It's only going to be temporary until you refresh it. And this probably isn't a good idea because, but now our rounded corners are gone, right? Our rounded corners are gone. So basically, like I said, though, you refresh this, is going to be back to where it was. Sometimes you can use this, and if this is confusing, I know this is a lot, and for me, even moving around here, I forget where things are. It's very busy. There's a lot of stuff here, so don't worry about it. Just remember this box stuff. You want to look at this box stuff. It's going to be under styles. Okay, elements is going to be. Elements, it's putting, and like I said, it depends on how it's configured on your machine. You can move things around. It depends on however it was before, right? However you used it last. But here's your elements. These are just basically your HTML elements. Here's your styles. Styles will have your box model, right? And like I said, if you feel comfortable doing it, you can change these things. So me just changing this to a 0, and you can see it automatically got rid of our rounded corners over here. If I refresh it, it'll be back again. So that's how rounded corners works. Okay. And rounded corners is going to be part of border radius. Okay, it's part of the border. Even though it's kind of strange, it actually shows here on the padding thing, but whatever, I don't know why. Content, it does it on the padding. I would think it would you show here, but that's just not the case. So whatever. Okay. And I know that this is, this takes time to get used to, and don't worry about it. If it's confusing, don't even worry about doing much in here. As time goes on, especially when we get into JavaScript, we'll be using this console a lot. Okay. Um, But this is a very helpful tool. Is if you really start expanding and really get into enjoy the style part of this program, which is basically the CSS, the web page stuff, the design stuff. You really start getting into design stuff and that, and um, it's helpful to be able to use these tools, but it's not really necessary. Okay, so I don't want you to get too confused about it. It's some tools that are here that are available. I do think that this stuff over here, we're going to, as you can see on the right hand side here. Okay, I'm going to show you this because this is going to be here in a minute. I'm going to show you some specifics with this because this is going to be a tool that can be used for your mobile first. You can actually set it for different devices, and I'm going to show you that here in a minute. All right, let's look at our code here again. Okay, so that was rounded corners. Use border radius for rounded corners. Let's just change this a little different though. We did 15 on this, obviously here, so we change it to 0, like we did in the thing. It's going to like that. Change it to say 30. All right. Oh, I don't know what I did there. All right, I had to change it to 30. See how much it's much different than 15, right? So usually it's going to be a small number. You just play with it, right? You just play with it. That's 15 looks good. Maybe even less than that. Depends on what you're doing here, All right. So that's that. What did I want to go over next here? What I think I'm going to do for the grid stuff, I think I'm going to do a separate video on grids. Okay. I'm going to do a separate video on grids. And this is a grid layout right here. Okay. I'm going to do a separate video on grids. But we'll still look at it a little bit here. But this is also what's doing a border radius. Displays grid. To do a grid, you have to display it as a grid. And then you got this grid template columns. So I'm going to do a separate video on this. I think it'd be much better than going over it right now. Okay. So let's go through real quick here this different positioning. We have relative, we absolute, we've got our fixed box down here. Here's our absolute box. This is our relative box, okay? So let's kind of go through that a little bit. As far as relative goes, so when you do position relative, up here, let me get rid of this. I don't know why that went over there. Position relative. It positions an element relative to its normal position in the document flow. The element's original space is preserved, and other elements on the page are not affected by its new position. Okay, because sometimes there's some things where you do positioning. If you position something in a certain spot, it'll actually push things over and things, so it can impact other things. But when you use position relative, it doesn't really impact other things. It's just going to put it where it kind of can, and it shouldn't impact too many other things, right? And so the other elements on page are not affected. Now, position absolute positions an element. So this positions an element relative to its nearest positioned ancestor. So its ancestor is this relative box. Okay, so when you do an absolute, whatever it's kind of really its parent. I would call it really in this case a parent, but it's basically it's an ancestor, right? Um, the element is taken out of the normal document flow. Okay, I know that might be a little hard to understand. You'll understand as time goes on. But it takes it out of normal document flow and other elements on the page and will reflow to fill the space it once occupied. Um, Now, position fixed, this value keeps an element in the same place on the screen even when the page is scrolled. If something else is in its way, it doesn't matter. It's just going to stay there no matter what happens, like right here, right? And then obviously the top one was our position sticky. So this value, sticky makes an element behave like a relative element until a certain scroll position is reached, at which point it acts like a fixed element staying in place as the user continues to scroll. Okay. And so here's our different ones. Position absolute, position fixed, and here's our sticky one. Okay. And here you're using, important thing on the sticky header, using this Z index. Okay, using a Z index. And if you feel like you need a little more help with some of this stuff, you can go to W3 Schools, and we go in here and search. Let me bring this up. Let's see what it has. I don't even know what it has. How to create a sticky on CSS position property, absolute sticky. It's showing the different ones here. Relative, fixed, and here's also sticky. And so you can try it yourself, okay? And you can play around on this if that's, sometimes an easier thing to do. I have a position sticky, and if you kind of went here and scroll around, you'll see it kind of works the same way, right? So you can play around with some different things on that, okay? This one doesn't have a Z index though, does it? Does have, top is important, top 0. Let's just do that here and see what happens on that. Oh, I'm gonna run this. Well, see, it's not, because we made it 50, it's not really doing what you think, right? Top needs to be 0. I keep hitting the save button. And in that case, since it's 0, it will stop at the top part, right? At 0, the 0 position. So position sticky and top 0 is the most important part, okay? On a sticky. Relative really doesn't, you can just, all you got to really do for relative, say position relative. For a fix, you got to say fixed. And this is just positioning it at the bottom. Let's just go look at it here. It's positioning it 0, 0. Well, 0, 0 is basically your very, well, it's in the way with my picture's in the way. So 0, 0 is horizontal and vertical. Let me fix this so we just kind of look at this a little better. So when 0, 0, you're basically horizontal, vertical. This is your 0, 0. So bottom right, bottom and right is going to be 0, 0. It's going to start here. Then you're building your box, but it's going to stay fixed in that location, right? And then what else we had? Relative. Fixed. We looked at fixed, absolute. And you always remember with absolute, there's always basically what's called an ancestor element, parent element. It's part of something else, right? And it's so this one has a relative position. This one has an absolute position, and this has an association with kind of this ancestor related one. Okay. Here's your relative one, and here's your absolute one. So in this case, you can see this is a div. So here's your ancestor one, and then here's basically you have a child element, right? So here's your child div, right? So this is absolute in relation to its parent. Okay, and you can play with that, play around with that as well. All right. So the next thing I want to show you here is, I think, the media queries. Well, we can do this. We'll do the pseudo one. So basically, a pseudo class. In this case, you got list items. So this is class of list items, and then you're saying, give me the first list item. Give me list item. Give me the first child of list item, and then make that font weight bold and make the color blue, right? So let's look at the HTML for that. So basically, you're saying you're using this class, and then li and first child. And so what that does, because we probably didn't talk about that, it's going to go find the class that has list items. Okay, we really haven't done that quite like that before. So it's going to look for the class that has list items. Okay, and then it's going to be the list item, the first child of the list item. And it's a pseudo classes. And so here's list items. Here's the class list items. Okay, and it's going to find it's going to the list item, and it's finding the very first child, which is this one, right? And then it's styling that one, which is the first item. And the other one, let's look at hover as well. And here you're just doing a hover. This is a special one using :hover, and this is pseudo class, right? Just like first child, this is a special one, first child. This is a special one called hover. So basically, whenever you hover over it, it's going to change the color, and it's going to take the text decoration, right? And the text decoration by default, and any kind of a link is always going to have, it's basically going to have a line under it, right? But you can, if you put underline here, it will, it's underlined, but you can do none, right? And then if I go under here, it'll go none, right? It disappeared completely. If I put it back the way it was, it's going to always stay there. But if you don't want that, you can use none. And that's only on hover. That's on hovering, right? Otherwise, you just do a style saying text declaration on all your links or whatever. On this specific link, did not have that. You can do that as well. Okay, so we got that. Scroll down to see sticky. We've already done that. So the next thing I wanted to show you here. Okay, so media screen. So these are just a special thing to use, and this is going to basically change things. So this is going to change, in this case, it's changing the header, It's changing these different um, uh, styles that you already have defined, and it's changing. Like here, you're doing a flex direction, right? And you're changing this to a column. So this is for. So basically, I'll show you how this works, right? Um, so this says max width of 768. So this will be in mobile first. It's going to be text direction of column, and this is the stuff that we've seen for our um, different ones here. Let's go look at our code here. Our main nav. So it's our navigation, all of our navigation. Our header, our main navigation. Okay, so let's go look at our main navigation here. So here's our navigation. So by default, navigation is going to be, well, that's because it's already changed. It's going to be like this, right? So if you don't, if you don't do something like a media query here, you try to see this in mobile, it's just going to leave this up here, right? Crunch it together. It'll do whatever it can to just try to get it fit on the screen. But it's not going to be appealing. It's not going to be like this, right? It's not going to be like this. And this is kind of what you want on a mobile device, right? So to do that, basically what we're doing is we're using these media, what's called a media query, okay? And we're saying, and max width of 78. So it will be like this until it reaches 768. When it gets bigger than 768, I'm going to show you a little bit of that, how that works though. But once it reaches 768, it keeps on changing here. It's actually going to, once it reaches that certain spot, boom, it's going to come like that. So let's go look at that here using developer tools real quick. Okay, let's do F12 on this. And we want to get rid of some stuff here. It's in my way. I don't need all this. Okay. So let's do responsive. Let's see here. Let me just make this bigger, a lot bigger. So basically, this is here's the dimensions, right? So let's make this 780. Okay, and here let's look at our code one more time. I want to make sure I got this right. So 768, right? And that's a standard kind of number to use. It's kind of a best practice number, standard. I shouldn't say best practice. It's kind of what's used from the device standpoint, right? It's kind of the specifications. So that's one of the numbers. Okay, 768. So as you can see here, and this better work, right? It should. So if I keep on going down, I'm making this smaller. We're at 771 right now. 770, 69, 68. So once you reach the 68, it will execute or apply, I should say. It will apply once it reaches that 768. It will apply these styles. Okay, it'll apply these styles. So let's just, for fun here, let's find out. Let's see what else we have on this page. I just want to play with something here. Um, our H1 tag. Yeah, I probably shouldn't really do that like that though. Let me see here. Um, just kind of wanted to show you that you can do all kinds of things. Not that you necessarily want to do this, but I just wanted to kind of show you how this kind of works. Um, so if I go, I grab that. Let me just grab that. I don't even know why I'm grabbing all of that, to be honest with you. Okay, so I'm going to say, I want to add this to this. So I'm just going to say, um, so I'm actually changing the font family of this one. Not that that necessarily makes sense to do it. I'm just kind of showing you how you can basically manipulate anything on here. So here's your responsive web design. Let's make this bigger. And you can look at the font look at this one here, right? And you notice when we get down to 768, it's different, right? It's different. It's using a different font, right? It's using a different font. You can tell if you look at that a little bit, especially at the bottom here, right? So you can change anything like that. And sometimes you want to maybe not show something at all. You got a really complex site, you may not want to show something at all. Um, that should work. Let's go check that out here. So, okay, we're at 768. Let's just go up one more. 768. Boom. Look, our title just disappeared. Basically, because I went ahead and not, like I said, not necessarily want to do that, but there may be some elements on the page you said, you know, this is great for desktop. It's not needed for the functionality. Let's just not display that, right? So basically, there's our title. Once we reach the 768, it's going to apply those. It's going to apply those styles that's in here. And in this case, we're saying display none for that heading, right? Now, heading wouldn't be one, you know, but it might be just some other miscellaneous text you have on a page. You said, you know, it's not going to work well on the mobile. Let's just not include it, right? And the same thing, you can use these media queries for printing too, right? So if you've ever like printed out a web page before, you do file print, right? A web page, you can actually create special CSS so you're not, you know, you're displaying it in a more friendly way, right? Takes some work, but you know, you can actually create one for print, right? In this case, we're creating this for screen. You can also create one for print so that when you print a web page, you might want to do display none on a bunch of stuff. Well, we don't want to display this. We don't want to display that. You can change things around, right? Here we're changing this directions, flex direction. We're changing this to column, right? For, you know, this mobile device, right? Um, all right. Let me see what else I wanted to go over, if anything. So I think that's about all I'm going to cover today. So tomorrow's kind of part two of this. So between this and what what I cover tomorrow, I also think if there's some certain areas that I might want to kind of create some separate little videos in area. I might do one um, on a grid container, how to do a grid. Um, um, and I guess that was one thing I also didn't kind of show you here, but I'll show you that real quick then too. That grid. So, but also here on this, we had that area down here. Um, so that wasn't included, this grid. This is just going to change this based on what it can fit. But we could have changed this to also this grid layout to be like this when it hits 768. We didn't have that here. This is just basically changing this based on what size is available. Whatever it can fit, it's going to try to fit it all the way till you get really, really small. It'd be easier for me just to do it this way. Once it gets really small, it'll be one column, right? 506 or wherever. Yeah, not quite. So, okay. Okay, so like I said, that's all I really have for today. We'll go ahead and do the second part of this tomorrow. And I'll try to look at maybe doing a little bit of separate videos on a couple of different areas as well. So have a nice day. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.